Good evening and welcome to Big Future Live. Tonight is all about the FAFSA, or the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. You're here tonight, so you probably have some questions. When do you need to apply? How much aid will you get? When will you need to complete the application? Well, tonight we have a panel of financial aid experts who are ready to get you the answers that you need. So get those questions ready and welcome to Big Future Live.
I've been drawing since I was 5 years old. My stick figures have turned into real-life designs. Now, I'm ready to dream even bigger. The part I would have never dreamt of was how expensive college would be. Luckily, with Big Future, I was able to find different grants and scholarships. It was the assistance I needed and money I don't have to pay back. Now, I have a plan that helps me figure out how I'm going to pay for my dorm room, classes, books, and even my meal plan. Not sure how to pay for college? Big Future can help. Your future, your way.
Hi everyone, my name is Greg. I use he, him pronouns, and I work here on the Big Future team. I'll be your host this evening, and I'm so excited to welcome you to what is actually our final event of the year. We'll be back in 2024, final event of the year, what you need to know about the new FAFSA. First off, I just want to thank all of you for joining us tonight and tuning in. We know you're all busy. You have a lot going on. We're approaching the holidays, but we're so glad that you decided to share this space with us tonight. For those of you who don't know, Big Future Live is a series of free virtual community events where we connect you with college reps, financial aid experts, peers, career experts to help you plan for life after high school in the way that's going to be best for you. Big Future Live was created so that you can get your questions answered to plan your future your way. So don't worry, tonight you're not going to sit through a long presentation or tons of PowerPoint slides. We have 45 minutes here, and this is a virtual community powered by students, by parents, by families, by educators to get your questions answered. Now, like I said, we only have 45 minutes here, and we already have a ton of folks who are tuning in. So let's go ahead and get started and meet our panelists for this evening. Awesome. Welcome to all of you. We're just going to go around and do some introductions, and I'm going to ask you three things. Tell us your name and pronouns if you'd like, where you work and what you do, and in one word, how would you describe the financial aid process? I know that can be hard, but in one word. And let's start with you, Brendan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brendan Williams. I'm a financial aid expert at You Aspire, which is a national nonprofit focused on increasing the economic mobility of students to help them by helping them navigate the financial barriers to their post-secondary pathway. If I had to pick one word to talk about the financial aid process, I would choose complicated.
Complicated, and it can be complicated, and that's why folks are here to hopefully make things a little clearer. Carmen, you're up.
Hi, everyone. I am Carmen Palacios Aguirre. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an assistant director at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Do a little bit of outreach, counseling, one-on-one, anything financial aid related with our current or incoming students. I would use the word tedious for financial aid.
Tedious. All right, we got complicated, we got tedious. Let's see what our third one is. Angela, on to you.
Good evening, everyone. Angela Johnson. I serve as the Vice President of Enrollment Management at Cuyahoga Community College in Cleveland, Ohio. I go by she, her pronouns. So when I think about the FAFSA, I think about necessary. It's necessary to complete the FAFSA as you're thinking about and planning for college.
Awesome. Complicated, tedious, necessary. And we're really going to dig into, honestly, why you chose those words throughout the conversation today. But thank you all so much. Looking forward to the advice you have to share all about FAFSA and financial aid. Now, before we get to your questions out there in our audience, we just want to know who's out there, who is joining us tonight. You are going to see a quick poll pop up on your screen. Tell us, what grade are you in? Or if you're a parent or educator out there, what grade is your student in? 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, or you're getting started early, are you in middle school? We'd love to know who you are. That quick pop-up is going to appear on your screen. But while you're answering that, let's talk about how today is going to work. There's an Ask a Question box on the bottom of your screen where you can submit questions. We have folks on the back end who are monitoring those questions. They're typing back responses and also feeding questions to me. And we're going to get to as many questions as possible. If you miss anything during today's event, or you have to walk away from your computer or from your phone for a moment, don't worry, the recording is going to be available later on demand at bigfuture.org/live. And you'll also get an email tomorrow with a link to the recording. So let's see who is in our audience. Let's see, and I had some guesses, and I was right. 78% of our students or adults in the audience are 12th graders or parents or educators of 12th graders. So this is going to be a very relevant conversation. We also have a mix of about 22% 10th and 11th graders who are starting early and really want to know how to navigate this process. So whatever grade you're in the right place, and we're really here to dive into your questions. And let's go ahead and get started. Our first question is from Shakira, and Shakira wants to know, what tax forms do you need to fill out to complete the 2024-2025 FAFSA? Angela, what tax forms do we need to have?
So the good thing about it is taxes that should already be done. So you would need your 2022 taxes to complete the 24-25 FAFSA.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Angela. Great question, Shakira. Joshua has our next question, and this is going to go to you, Carmen. Joshua wants to know, is the FAFSA grants and loans, could the offer change if you go to a college outside of your home state? So Carmen, if you wouldn't mind, before you talk about if the FAFSA is grants and loans, could you just define the FAFSA for us?
Of course. So federal financial aid comes in all different sorts: grants, scholarships, loans, and the federal work study. All of those are considered financial aid. So it does include grants and loans. And it does change kind of depending on where you go. For example, in North Carolina, if you are an out-of-state student, you would not be eligible for the North Carolina state grants and scholarships that we have, which is why it is cheaper to kind of go in-state when you are going to college.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Carmen. And for those of you out there, there should be a definition of the FAFSA on your screen as well. The federal application for federal student aid. It's an application that students can fill out to be considered for federal financial aid. All right, our next question is going to be for Brendan. This question is from Dulina. Dulina wants to know, is the FAFSA for current seniors or current juniors?
Great question. So if you are a current senior planning to go to college next year, you should be filling out the FAFSA this year. And so that FAFSA that's there, one thing to note, every year you plan to go to college, you need to fill out the FAFSA. So it's not just senior year. It's after that first year, second year, third year. I took 5 years. So after that fourth year. And so if you want financial aid for college, every year you want to be filling that out.
Awesome. That's a great takeaway, Brendan. Remember, every year you're going to need to fill out that FAFSA if you want federal student aid. Thanks for the question, Julian. I'm sure other students out there had the same one. All right. Next question is from Taylor. Does everyone apply for the FAFSA, or are there specific prerequisites? That's a great question, Taylor. So who is eligible for the FAFSA? Who's eligible to complete it? Who's eligible to receive federal student aid? Angela, what do you say?
So all students who are applying for college would be eligible to complete the FAFSA, meeting certain criteria, primarily U.S. citizens. And I think that's really important when you start to really think about who can complete the FAFSA. There's certain information that asks you about that on the FAFSA application. But some colleges also provide options for you that may not be the FAFSA application, but may have other ways to apply for financial aid that helps individuals who may be international students, refugees, asylees, to have options to receive financial aid funding through other channels of grants and other funds that might be available, scholarships, etc. But most students would complete the FAFSA. That's your starting point, which is why I use the word necessary. It's a starting place for really determining federal, in most cases, state financial aid, and in a lot of cases, institutional financial aid as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Angela. And thanks for that question, Taylor. Lizette, you also had a similar question about eligibility. And I think Angela's response covered that as well. Our next question is for you, Brendan. This is from Adil. Adil wants to know, what is the difference between FAFSA and financial aid?
That is a great question. So what you should view the FAFSA as a gateway to receive financial aid. And so the FAFSA is an application that you're applying for certain types of financial aid. So you're applying for federal aid. Sometimes, depending on your state, you could be applying for state aid. And depending on the institution, you could also be applying for institutional aid. Some colleges, as Angela mentioned, have other applications they may require for institutional aid. And institutional aid means grants and scholarships, potentially loans and work study from the college itself. And so some colleges may have the CSS profile to fill out, or they might have their own form to fill out to access institutional aid. But the FAFSA is a gateway. Financial aid is an all-encompassing term that means money to help you pay for college.
Awesome. That is a great question, Adil, to help us kind of be really clear about what financial aid is. And I'm going to ask a follow-up question, Brendan. You provided some examples of financial aid, like grants, loans, and scholarships. Are there other forms of financial aid that might be available to students as well?
Yeah, so the three main types are grants and scholarships, which we like to call free money, loans, which are borrowed money, which you have to pay back, and then there's earned money, which is work study. And so what work study is you might see this on your financial aid offer. Basically, it says you can get a job, usually on campus, where they will pay you to work, and you'll get that money paid to you throughout the year. And so usually students will use that if they're eligible and if they are able to get a work study job, they will use that to help pay for some everyday expenses because that money is not available up front. But that is another form of financial aid. So there's that free money, borrowed money, and earned money.
I love the way you defined it to make it very easy, hopefully, for students to understand and take away a little of the complication or tediousness of it. Thanks for that, Brendan. So we talked a little bit about the basics, about what financial aid is, what the FAFSA is. We also have some students who have questions just about like how to get started with the FAFSA. And so Zulmi has a question. This is for you, Carmen. Where do we go to fill out the FAFSA?
That is a great question because you might think, oh, I can just Google this, but it is very important to know where you are going to fill out the FAFSA. The FAFSA is a federal, it's by the Federal Department of Education. So you are going to want to go to studentaid.gov, G-O-V. You are not going to want to go to anything that ends in .com, .org, .net, .gov. The reason for this is there's a lot of unsavory websites that are going to make you want to pay for the FAFSA. And we want to remember the first word that the F stands for in FAFSA is free. You're never going to want to pay for the FAFSA. It's free to complete, but you should always go to studentaid.gov.
Awesome. Great reminder. It's free, folks. Studentaid.gov. Thanks so much, Carmen. Angela, this question is from Lisa. Lisa wants to know, do both parents need an FSA ID? And if you could explain what an FSA ID is for our audience, that would be great.
Yes, that's a great question. So yes, both parents will need to complete the request process for an FSA ID. And the FSA ID is a unique identifier for each individual, not just the parents completing the FAFSA, but also the students. So all parties will need to have an FSA ID. It helps to secure the information that you're providing. It's unique to you as the user or your parent, and certainly as a student, but it's to ensure that the information is only available to you. You should not share your FSA ID with anyone, and you should use that and also keep up with that, because you, as Brendan mentioned, you do have to do the FAFSA every year. You can use the same FSA ID every year. So it's important to keep up with that. And if you need to go back, make any changes or corrections, you have that information available. That certainly helps you to complete the process easier.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for that, Angela. And thanks for the question, Lisa. For those of you who are looking for additional guidance on the FAFSA or instruction on how to create your FSA ID, you can actually head to Big Future. With the application, FAFSA application opening later this month, you can find some really great guidance on what you can do now to prepare, including creating your FSA ID. So if you scan the QR code that you see on your screen right now, you can find additional information and get additional instruction. You can use Big Future to just stay on track and get additional articles and content as more information comes out. We have a lot of seniors who are in our audience right now. Seniors, after you complete the FAFSA, you can verify that you took this action on your Big Future dashboard to qualify for monthly drawings for $500 and $40,000 scholarships. Also, you can qualify by completing any of the other unlocked steps on your Big Future dashboard, including verifying that you applied to 2 or more colleges, saving 3 or more careers to your list, and adding colleges to your list as well. Students with an annual family income of less than $60,000 also get extra chances at winning these $500 and $40,000 Big Future scholarships. For our sophomores and juniors out there, it's a little too early for you to complete the FAFSA right now. You won't need to complete that until your senior year of high school, but you can start looking for schools that are an academic, financial, and social fit using Big Future and your personalized dashboard as well. And when you save 3 schools to your college list, when you save 3 careers to your career list, you can also qualify for $500 and $40,000 Big Future scholarships. So again, scan that QR code if you want additional information or guidance on the FAFSA. And let's get back to some more questions from our audience. All right, our next question is going to be for you, Brendan, and this is also related to how you get started with the process. This question is from Felicia. Felicia wants to know, does the new FAFSA somehow link or connect to your IRS tax return to gather data from that? And if it can, is that a good idea or a bad idea in your opinion?
That, once again, another great question, and someone who is up to date on changes to the FAFSA. So yes, so the 24-25 FAFSA has a process that I'm going to throw some words and I'm going to define them, called the Direct Data Exchange. And so what that means is it is able to connect the IRS with the FAFSA, with the Department of Ed. And so in the FAFSA, what you're going to do is you're going to consent to the Direct Data Exchange, which means that the IRS has permission to share your federal tax information with the FAFSA. What this will do is this will make it so that you don't have to answer a ton of income and tax questions on your FAFSA. You actually won't even see them. And so is it that a good idea or a bad idea? It is a good idea because it'll simplify the FAFSA, but also it's a good idea because it's required for you to be eligible for federal student aid to consent to that process. And so when the 24-25 FAFSA comes out, make sure you consent to that process, and it'll really simplify it, but also ensure that you are eligible to receive federal student aid.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Brendan. And it sounds like, it's a simpler process. So thanks for that question, Felicia. I'm sure there are others who have the same one. Laura had this next question. This is going to go to you, Carmen. Do we still list all the schools we are applying to on the FAFSA or only after being accepted by the school? How will each school let us know the financial aid package that they're offering?
Yeah, that is a very great question and one that I get frequently. I recommend, and I'm sure a lot of us would recommend, that you list all of the schools that you are applying to on the FAFSA before you even know if you're going to be admitted or not, before you are accepted. The reason for this is usually students would be able, at least in my university, we would be able to get them their financial aid package or offer at the time of acceptance. Because of the FAFSA changing, we are not going to be able to do that at the earliest until 2 to 3 weeks after a student is accepted. So you want to know, so that gives you a lot shorter time span to decide your financial aid, what school you're going to. So we recommend you do it as soon as possible so that the schools are already processing that financial aid before you even get accepted or a little bit after, so that you can get your financial aid package as soon as possible so that you have time to make the decisions that you need to make. And the schools will let you know your financial aid package either in an email or a letter or on your application portal.
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Laura, and thanks for the response, Carmen. Headline here, fill it out as soon as possible so that the schools you're applying to can start to get that financial aid package ready as soon as possible. Our next question is going to go to you, Angela, and this is from Emrys. They ask, we have been asked to complete a CSS profile. How does that differ from the FAFSA?
Well, for this year, one big difference is that it's available now and the FAFSA isn't. That's one thing. I think when you think about getting started, the question that was asked earlier, what can you do now? You certainly can do the CSS profile now, and the FAFSA is coming soon. We know around the holidays, let's say. So we're expecting the FAFSA around that time. But the difference is some of the questions are slightly different. Some of the content is different. Some schools will require the CSS profile. Other schools may not require that. But it certainly allows colleges who do require the profile or who use the profile to provide a little bit more information about your eligibility, giving you particularly around what you heard Brendan talk about around institutional aid. They may use that to make decisions around institutional aid as well. So you should check with the schools that you're applying to see if they do have the CSS profile, do they offer that, and how they might use that in some of the decisions that they're making around your financial aid award packet. As Carmen mentioned, because of the timing of the FAFSA coming out next year is a little bit later, you may have some schools who are doing a little bit more work on their CSS profile earlier because you do have an opportunity to do that now. So that's a part of getting started now that you could probably maybe start before the holidays. One way to kind of think about what you might want to do as you're making some decisions, especially for our seniors tonight.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Angela. And thanks for the question, Emrys. Again, that's another thing that you can do right now to complete the CSS profile. And Angela also mentioned something very important. We are expecting for the FAFSA application to open by the end of the month. So more information on that as it becomes available. Our next question is going to be for you, Brendan. This is from Karina. Karina says, if your parent already has an FSA ID because there's an older sibling that completed the FAFSA, do they need to create a new one, or does the new child who is going to college just need to create one?
So FSA IDs that were previously created are still good for the new FAFSA, and a parent can use an FSA ID for multiple children's FAFSAs. So they do not need to create a new one. If you are a student who has never filled out the FAFSA before, you do need to create an FSA ID in order to access the form. I will say there is one caveat where, because of the new process I talked about where you need to consent, there are situations where maybe one parent has an FSA ID, but actually because the parents don't file taxes together and both are required to be on the FAFSA, the other parent may need to create one. And so it's important there are some slight changes to the rules. But in short, an FSA ID used with a sibling by a parent is good to use with your FAFSA as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that clarity, Brendan. Our next question is for you, Carmen. This is from Gregory. Good name, Gregory. Gregory says, my understanding of the FAFSA is that it can be dual purpose. It can be used to actually receive federal student aid, and some colleges might base their own financial aid packages partly or wholly on the FAFSA. Is that accurate, Carmen?
That is a very good question. So I would say yes, in the sense it's dual purpose. The application is so that, yes, you can actually receive financial aid, federal aid. If you don't complete the FAFSA, you're not going to get that money. And then, yes, some colleges base their financial aid package wholly on the FAFSA and partly. For example, I went to North Carolina State University. We only used the FAFSA. I did not have to complete a CSS profile. However, at UNC, North Carolina, at Chapel Hill, we use both the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Both of these schools are public. They're both in-state. It just depends on what the school you're going to and how they are processing their financial aid.
Thanks, Carmen. And is that a question they could ask a financial aid advisor at that specific school too to get more clarity?
Yes, that is a great. I highly recommend reaching out to the schools that you are applying to double check and make sure that you are submitting everything that you need to submit. For example, again, UNC uses the CSS profile, and we won't be able to give you institutional aid if we don't have that. So if you wait until the very last day of April and you are asking, hey, where's my financial aid package? I need more. You didn't complete your CSS profile. I can't give you any more until you complete that, unfortunately. So yes, just double check with your colleges and your universities to make sure you are completing all the applications that you need to complete.
Awesome. Great advice, Carmen, and great question, Gregory. Hopefully that was helpful. Angela, Kyla has a question just about the differences between the 2024, the new FAFSA and the old one. Can you give us just headlines? What are some key differences that we might expect?
Yeah, there's so many, so many differences. So yeah, as Greg mentioned, I'll give some headlines. So one of the biggest differences, and you heard a little bit from Brendan, is the matching of the FAFSA information with the IRS data. And one of the key differences there related to that, beyond what Greg already described, is in terms of how the matching, and you have to authenticate that, you have to agree to the data exchange, is that the skip logic that's built into the FAFSA, we hope to see fewer questions that are presented to students and parents as they're completing the FAFSA. Some of the language is different. So parents are no longer indicated as parents on the FAFSA. They're indicated as contributors. So if a parent had a student who was in school last year, you'll see some different language this year when you complete the FAFSA. Some other language that's different in your FAFSA results. We used to call it the estimated family contribution, and we use that to calculate how much Pell you will be eligible for. Now it's called the instead of EFC, which is estimated family contribution, it's now SAI, is the student aid index. So just some different languages there. And one of the big differences, and I can't stress this enough, is the time. So if you are used to doing the FAFSA in the last several years, October 1, now it's available, will be at the end of December. So I think that's one of the key differences. Carmen talked about that a little bit in terms of the timing in which the awards might be available. So again, seniors may not know the difference, looking at it, as their first year, but parents who had a student in school last year or previous year, they'll see some of those differences in the timing. So some of those things are going to be important as the FAFSA is released. There's several other key differences. So sure, others might want to share some ideas of what they're kind of tracking on that's different as well going into the new year.
Angela, the only thing I would add is for parents who've maybe filled out the FAFSA in the past, or if you've seen the FAFSA before, it's going to look and feel very different, and that's okay. There might be questions that used to be answered and then aren't answered now, and that's okay. Questions have been removed. A few questions have been added or changed slightly, and just recognize that it is a different form.
Awesome. Thank you both, and thank you for the question, Kyla. Hopefully, that gave you a preview of what some of the differences might be. Our next question is for you, Carmen. This is from Corey. Corey asks, if the parents are divorced, should you put both incomes on the FAFSA application?
Yeah. So we realize, and FAFSA realizes, that not all parents are married. Different family situations. Some have different legal guardians, etc. If the parents are divorced, the way that the FAFSA is going to ask you to fill it out is who contributes the most, or who the student lives with the most out of the 12 months out of the year. And that is going to be their main contributor. The FAFSA has a great little, I don't know, how do you call it? The little
diagram.
We've called it the parent wizard. The parent wizard is like the lingo we've been using.
Yeah, so it's going to ask you, are your parents married? Yes, you put you put both parents or all parents. Are your parents divorced? Yes, you're going to put one parent. Are you under legal guardianship? This is what you're going to put. So again, the studentaid.gov website has a bunch of resources and diagrams to make this easier for you. And again, it's just going to go through and ask, and it should hopefully be very simple. If you have questions filling it out, they have great helplines available for students. And some of your local colleges or high schools might be doing FAFSA nights.
Awesome. Great advice, Carmen. So yeah, definitely go to studentaid.gov, and they should have more resources to help you decide like if you put both of your parents on that application or not. Our next question is going to be from Joshua. This is going to be for you, Brendan. How likely is it that you'll get financial aid from the FAFSA? For example, do they only select some students, or do they provide some sort of aid to everyone who's eligible?
This is a difficult question to answer broadly. And so I'm going to do my best, and of course, invite Angela and Carmen to add any additional details. So when completing the FAFSA, they consider a number of different factors to determine what types of financial aid you're eligible for. Number one, most people who complete the FAFSA will be eligible for some type of financial aid. Remember, financial aid is grants, scholarships, loans, and work study. No matter what your income is, and no matter what your SAI is, you will be eligible for federal loans of some type. The other piece is what federal aid you are eligible for depends on your student aid index, which is calculated by using household income and the number of people in your household size. And so depending on your student aid index, that will determine whether you're eligible for the Pell Grant, which is a type of federal financial aid. Also, the states will use that student aid index to determine your eligibility for state grants as well, or they could potentially use another state aid application depending on the state that you're in. And then institutions as well will use that student aid index to determine what types of institutional aid you are eligible for, unless they've required an additional form like the CSS profile, which has been mentioned before. And so it really will vary based on your financial situation, the number of people in the household, and who else is included on the FAFSA. And so if you're an independent student who doesn't need to include parental information, or if you're dependent and you are required to include parent information. And so it will vary quite a bit. But what I'll say is to get access to any type of federal financial aid, and remember that there's many different types, you do need to complete the FAFSA. And so whether or not you know for a fact you're eligible, you should complete it to access financial aid.
Can I add something?
Please, yes.
Real quick. Yes. So there's a misconception that if, I don't qualify for financial aid, I'm not going to qualify, I shouldn't fill it out. I highly recommend you still fill it out, because you never know what can happen during the school year. And some schools have processes to reconsider your aid, but they would need that FAFSA. And it's just quicker to have it on file, easier. Again, it's free. Just take a little bit of time to fill it out. And that way, if something does happen in the future, you are prepared.
Great advice. Great advice, all. Our next question is going to be for you, Angela. This is from Malik. This is a big one. What is the max amount of money you can get from the FAFSA? What do you say, Angela?
Well, that is a really good question. I think thinking about a couple of things that Brendan also shared and kind of thinking about what type of financial aid you can receive. So grants, loans, work study, et cetera. The max amount depends on lots of factors, or as we like to say in financial aid, it depends. And that's just kind of the easiest way to kind of think about how we kind of answer some questions. But it's going to also depend on multiple factors. One of the factors, not just your financial eligibility, as Brendan described how the student aid index is calculated. It's also going to depend on the cost of the institution. So the cost of attendance is a really big factor. I mentioned earlier, I work at a community college. Our cost of attendance is going to be lower than a university cost. So that's part of what the max out could be. From the Pell Grant, it's going to depend on your financial situation. Your student loans could depend also on your grade level. So if you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, so it all depends, but it cannot exceed the cost of attendance for the institution that you plan to go to. So that absolutely is the ceiling, but other things that are really focused on your financial situation and merit in particular as well. And then other factors that kind of look at maximum of loans. Some schools may have a maximum amount of work study that they provide, and so other things like that. But I think one of the things to really kind of think about is knowing the cost of the institution that you plan to go to. All colleges are required to post that information on their website, so you can look at the cost of the institution and then kind of start, once you complete the FAFSA, get a sense of what your Pell eligibility might be if you're eligible for that, what your loan eligibility might be if you plan to borrow student loans. Consider also other places that you might apply for financial aid. And sometimes it's not at the college. Maybe you're applying for scholarships at other local community organizations, but all of those things factor into the maximum around the cost of attendance from the school you plan to go to.
That's great, Angela. And you touched on a couple of things. I'm going to ask you a couple of follow-up questions. Can you explain to us what the cost of attendance is and how a net price calculator might be helpful?
Yes, that's a great follow-up. So the cost of attendance, all schools are required to designate the cost of attendance. That includes tuition and fees, books and supplies, estimated costs for transportation, especially for students who live out of state as well. So if you're traveling back and forth in state, out of state, or even around town, if you are local to where you plan to go to school, formerly known as room and board, but now known as meals. What is it? Meals and
Housing.
Housing. It's sort of housing, but I think is it called housing now? Because I think we changed from room and board to housing and meals or food allowance, and other expenses around that. But all of those things kind of add up. So we sometimes think about this as direct costs and indirect costs. But that comes up with the cost of attendance. But then how the net price calculator plays into that is each school is also required to publish the net cost. So what the average cost is for most of their students, and the cost meaning it looks at the total cost in terms of the cost of attendance, and it calculates some of the estimated awards and funds that most students receive. So that if you have a school where students receive significant amount of grants and loans, et cetera, it helps you to kind of get a sense of how much you might pay based on other circumstances for students who are similarly situated.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Angela. I really appreciate that. And Malik, thanks for the question. I think it provided a lot of clarity for a lot of folks out there. Our next question, I can't believe that the time is really going here. Carmen, the next question is going to be from Samuel. Samuel wants to know, with the delay of the FAFSA this year, when will financial aid packages be ready? You touched on this a little bit before, but I'll just ask you to reiterate.
Yeah, of course. So as we all know, the FAFSA is coming out at the end of this month by December 31st. So it's going to be available. And then it takes 2 to 3 weeks for us to get that information back from the Federal Department of Education. And then it takes schools another possibly 2 to 3 weeks to actually process that information. So we are looking about beginning or middle to end of February of you getting your financial aid packages. Unfortunately, that's just how it is this year. Usually it's when you are admitted, you get that, but just because of the delay, we're going to be rushing a little bit. And don't believe me, we are stressed already about getting those to you as quick as possible.
Thanks for that, Carmen. And Sam, we just know that there are folks in these financial aid offices who are doing their best, and they're going to get those packages out as soon as they can. Thanks for the question, Samuel. All right, Brendan, this is for you. So Jonathan's been watching, and Jonathan is like, all right, you're telling me how to get started. You're telling me the timeline. You're telling me the basics. But Jonathan wants to know right now, what should we be doing until the actual form comes out at the end of the month?
Great, wonderful question, and something that we've been working with the students that we work with at U Aspire to sort of coach them through and really encourage them to do certain things. Number one, if you don't have an FSA ID, go create your FSA ID. If your parents don't have FSA IDs, have them create their FSA IDs. You can create them now, and they're going to work on that FAFSA coming out by December 31st. The other thing that you should do is start gathering information. So there is a lot of information you need on the FAFSA. And so while information might be automatically transferring over from the IRS to your FAFSA, it can be good to have those tax forms on hand just to know what's being used. And there might be some questions you need to answer along the way that maybe didn't transfer over. And so having tax forms and other information available can be helpful. The last thing, applying for scholarships. Scholarship applications are available year-round, but a lot of them are coming due in the fall and the winter. And really, what you don't want to do is wait until you get that bill and say, actually, I need some more money to cover that bill. So our recommendation is apply to scholarships year-round. Right now, you have some additional time before the FAFSA comes out. Maybe get a few scholarships in before that December 31st and January, and you might be filling out the FAFSA. And then the other thing I'll just add, I know I said 3, and now I'm going on 4. If there are any other financial aid applications, like the CSS profile, you should get those done. The CSS profile is available now. Usually, if they have any institutional forms, they can probably be filled out now as well. And so with any other requirements, I would get those done before the FAFSA is available. And then once the FAFSA comes out, fill that out.
Awesome. Really clear next steps, Brendan. Get that FSA ID created, get those tax forms ready and available, apply to scholarships, and a good place to start is on Big Future for that. And then also get that CSS profile completed in any other financial aid applications. We just have a couple minutes here, and Brendan, you kind of answered this last question already, which is what's one thing you want students to know about the FAFSA? You actually gave us 4, which again, we'll let it slide. But Carmen, Angela, we'd love to hear from you. What's one thing you want students to know about the FAFSA? And Carmen, I'll start with you.
I want students to know how important it is to fill it out. Again, even if you don't think you'll get anything, even if your parents don't have social security numbers, you can still fill it out. If you're an independent student, you don't have a job, you can still fill it out. Just want to reiterate how important it is for you to take 30 to maybe an hour, maybe even less than 10 minutes, honestly, with the simplification, to just fill it out. It's so important.
Thank you, Carmen. That goes back to what Angela said at the beginning, necessary, right? Angela, close us out. What's one thing you want students to know about the FAFSA and take away from this event?
Yeah, I want to pick up on something Carmen said earlier. I think it's really important for families to know that there's help. That there's help to fill out the FAFSA, whether you're working with your high school counselors, you're working with your community organizations, or you're working with either the school you plan to go to or a school that's near you. There's so much help to get the FAFSA completed because everybody wants to help students to fund their education. So make sure you reach out for help. You get some of the resources from Big Future so that you know what to do, you know what to do next. But don't be afraid to ask the questions.
That is such great advice to end on, Angela. And we started this event with saying it is complicated, it is tedious, but it's also necessary. And we know that it's complicated. That's why we're here tonight. That's why we're answering questions. And there are other folks out there who are ready to answer your questions as well. Don't be shy and make sure you reach out to them. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank all of our panelists for being here and answering so many questions. And of course, I wanted to thank all the students and caring adults in our audience. Thank you for asking the questions. Thank you for being here tonight. We'd love to hear how today's session went for you. After this event closes, you will be automatically redirected to a feedback survey. Please fill it out. It'll take you just a minute, and it'll help us make our next events even better. And if you missed anything during today's session, you want to revisit some of these responses, you can go to bigfuture.org/live to access the recording. And tonight is actually our last Big Future Live event of the year, but don't worry, we'll be back in 2024 with more virtual community events that are there to answer your questions about planning your life after high school. In the meantime, head to Big Future Live to watch some of those recordings to get more of your questions answered. Thanks everyone for being here. Happy holidays and have a great night.